still burdened by laryngitis, but that does not slow me down. I feel great. Laryngitis is one of those things you learn to live with in this business. Arthur Brooks is my guest. His brand new book, The Happiness Files, came out, and I read it on my D.C. to Little Rock to Manchester, New Hampshire to D.C. trek over the last 4 days, and I made 11 pages of notes, and I sent the notes to Arthur so he knows where I want to go and when I want to go there. But mostly he's going to do the talking. Arthur, congratulations. I love this book. I think it will change lives. I think that was your intention.
Thank you. That's the whole idea. Thank you, Hugh. And lovely to see you as always. I wish I were seeing you in person. We don't spend enough time together, and I'm reminded of that every time that we get to talk because you make me happy. That's what I have to say.
Yeah. Well, you point out in the book that the genuine things you ought to be looking for is family, faith, friends, and service. But happiness comes from that. I want to start, though, and make sure we get the major point I took away. Let's kill all the meetings. It's like a Shakespearean line. Why don't you expand on that and where it came from?
Yeah, sure. So this book, most of my books are published by Penguin Random House, and they're, big idea books. I have one coming out next March on the meaning of your life and how to find it, which is a lot of philosophy, a lot of behavioral science and neuroscience. This book actually is 33 essays that were the most popular essays that I've written over the past 5 years or so in The Atlantic, which is where my Thursday morning column comes out. So these are things that actually people have really reacted to well, and they focus mostly on work and how your work and your life can integrate with each other. So there's a lot of that theme. How can people work happier? How can they integrate their work into their life so that their work is not making their home life a lot worse? That sort of thing. And one of the things that you first mentioned is I wrote a whole column about meetings. And, I've been thinking about meetings for years. As some of your listeners might know, I used to be the president of the American Enterprise Institute, a big think tank in Washington, D.C. Man, I know meetings. And I've been a college faculty member off and on all throughout my career. And faculty meetings have been a part of my life. And I always tried to figure out what do they do to happiness? What do they do to productivity? And how can you actually design them? And so I did the research. And that's actually in one of the chapters of this book. You're going to have meetings in your life, but you can have a lot fewer. And when you do have them, that kind of the rules for making sure that they're not unproductive and terrible and make your life worse.
I thought it was a wonderful, we ought to clip it and send it to every boss out there in America, kill the meeting.
Yeah.
At the end of all this years that you've been writing on happiness for The Atlantic and your earlier book, From Strength to Strength, your book with Oprah, what percentage of behavior does Arthur Brooks believe is genetic and what percentage of behavior is learned? Just generally.
Yeah, so 50% of your happiness is genetic, and that's based on identical twin studies where identical twins were separated at birth and adopted into separate families. And that's an almost ideal situation using basic statistics to figure out what part of your personality, what part of your behavior, but mostly your personality and your worldview, how much of it is genetic and how much of it is actually learned by different families. And it's about 50%, somewhere between 42 and 58% is genetic, which might sound like depressing, but it actually isn't, because when you know your genetic tendencies, then you can tailor your habits. So, for example, the same studies find that about 50% of your tendency to drink alcohol to excess, that's genetic. But, Hugh, if you came to me and said, hey, old buddy, both my parents drank too much, all four of my grandparents were bootleggers, man, I'm doomed. And I'd say, well, I got a special technique, Hugh, that'll make it so that you never have trouble with alcohol. A new way to change your genetics. It's called not drinking. If you know your genetics, you can actually tailor your habits. So another 25% on top of that is circumstantial, but that's very temporary. Your circumstances don't last, but the circumstances can be engineered with your habits as well. So here's the good news and the answer to the question, Hugh. 25% of your happiness is under your direct managerial control due to habits. Another 25% is your circumstances, which are made better with good habits. And with those habits, you can actually manage your genetic tendencies. And that's all that matters, therefore, is the habits that you keep. And there's four, and you just named them. You need to worship every day. You need to understand your spiritual or religious life, or at very least your philosophical life, and pay attention to it. You need to pay attention to your family relationships and not spoil them or waste them, especially for something as stupid as politics. You need to maintain your friendships. And that means real friends, not deal friends. All the strivers listening to us know the difference between real and deal. And last but not least, you need to find meaning in your work. You need to sanctify your work by earning your success, which is why capitalism is better than any other system for happiness, and especially to serve other people.
So, Arthur, what happens to people You and I are both pretty good Catholics. You're a much better Catholic than I am, but I did the October, the first 8 days of November thing about praying for the dead. I did the work. So I'm a pretty good Catholic. But if you know what you should do and you don't do it, does that make you unhappy? If your spiritual life says do A, and you know that you're not doing A, does that make you unhappy?
Yeah, it really does. Actually, that was Carl Jung's theory of happiness, which is you have to know what you believe and then most importantly, act according to your own beliefs. Most people, they have certain beliefs, but they don't act according to those beliefs because they're cutting corners. So there's probably always time. The single fastest way that I can bring somebody into a happier place in their life is if I can root out their deep beliefs and then I can align their behaviors with those beliefs. Boy, their life is going to change just a lot. And this is why a lot of my students, I teach at the Harvard Business School, I teach MBA students, why a lot of them wind up going back to the faith of their youth because they'll come into office hours and say, I don't know the meaning of my life. And I'll say, let's start by talking about what you actually believe. Do you believe God exists? How did you worship when you were a little kid? And they wind up saying, I miss it. I miss it, professor. I miss it. And I say, okay, let's talk about getting you back in the pews. Let's talk about getting you back into the synagogue. And then they're so much happier because of alignment.
Now, another revelation to me was Maimonides' ladder of giving. I've read a lot about charity over the years because we do a lot of asking people for money. Like yesterday, we were raising money for the fund.org. But I've never heard of Maimonides' ladder of giving until I read the Happiness Files. Would you tell people, They don't even know who Maimonides is, but they know he's an important guy.
Yeah, he was one of the three great philosophers of medieval times in Southern Europe. So in Southern Europe, most notably in Spain, Southern France, and Italy, the three great Abrahamic religions were coexisting philosophically in real union. So this is the 11th century, 12th century, 13th century. And the three great thinkers from the great traditions were Thomas Aquinas, who of course was a Dominican monk and a Catholic. Then you had Averroes, who was a Muslim thinker. And then last but not least, you had Maimonides, also known as Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon of the Jewish tradition. And Maimonides, I mean, he was a Neoplatonist. He followed Plato, also Aristotle. He brought this to modern audiences. A lot of what we understand today is because of these three great thinkers. And what Maimonides paid an awful lot of attention to is the fact that life gets better when you transcend yourself. It's very important to remember that the more you pay attention to yourself, the more miserable you're going to get, which Mother Nature wants you to do. Mother Nature doesn't care if you're happy. She just wants you to pay attention to you. It's like Hugh all the way down all the time. And Hugh needs relief from Hughness. And the way that you do that is by transcending, to transcend to your relationship with the divine, and also transcending by serving other people. To that latter extent, Maimonides actually created a scale of the beauty and revelation, and especially the happiness that you'll get from different kinds of giving. And at the very top is giving in which they don't know that you're giving. You're giving out of the goodness of your heart. You might not even know who you're giving to, but somebody who truly needs it, and they actually can't come and thank you, thus spoiling the pure virtue and joy that comes from transcending yourself in this very, very genuine way.
Let's pause right there. I talked to Arthur for a half an hour yesterday. I've got more of my voice today, and I'll play more of it in an hour or two. I think the Happiness Files ought to be on every bookshelf in America. But I do want to let you know about something you can do to make yourself very happy, and that is call andrewandtodd.com about your mortgage. When you need a mortgage, when you need to refinance a mortgage, when you want to buy a house, when you want to move. Some of you don't get to choose when you move. Some of you are in the military and you have to move. Good news is you've got a veterans loan deal where you can have 0% down. Sell the house that you're in, do a veterans loan to where you're going. andrewandtodd.com, very good with veterans. Some of you are first-time home buyers and you really have no idea what you're doing. I mean, literally, no idea. But Andrew and Todd, Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian, Andrew has been my friend for 22 years, and I missed Bible study this morning again because I'm just trying to save my voice. And I've known Todd Avakian for half that time. They are with Union Home Mortgage, and you can call them at 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. The FHA announced today they're going to try and drop some rules that will let you take your 3% mortgage with you. I recommend that you not wait to call Andrew and Todd until a regulatory rulemaking gets done, because that might be never. Call them up. Tell them what your situation is. They're like counselors. They're wonderfully winsome, gracious people. Their whole team is. And they will help you from soup to nuts. Get your loan done, refinance your loan, get a home equity line of credit, you get a reverse mortgage. If you're a senior and you don't want to make any more mortgage payments, they'll do it all for you. All you have to do is call them, 888-888-1172, or go to their website, andrewandtodd.com. I'm almost at 50% of my voice back after laryngitis. I'm going to try and save it as much as possible by making my next guest, Bethany Mandel, talk as much as possible. Bethany, good to see you. My first ask is I always mention the Mom Wars at the end of our segment, and I usually rush through what it is and how people can order it, themomwars.substack.com. Would you take a minute to sell hard? Because people should be reading the Mom Wars.
Thank you. So the Mom Wars is a podcast and a Substack. You can find both at themomwars.substack.com, or you can go to any of your podcasting apps. And I started with Cara Kennedy because it felt like there was a lot of parenting commentary out there that was very doomer, very dark and dire, and a lot of the content out there is the wine moms, the moms who are hiding in closets drinking themselves into a stupor, and then there's the commentary from the people without children who belittle the idea of having children and try to diminish the appeal of it, and so Cara Kennedy and Cara is a young mom. She is pregnant with her second. Her first is just still a toddler. We wanted to give an alternate view of motherhood that was positive, that was realistic, and that spoke to conservative moms in particular, because there's not really anyone out there who's writing with that voice in mind, in my opinion.
I agree. And I really would like young women who are thinking about or who have become moms to spend the money to get the momwars.substack.com so you get good commentary on being a mom, happy commentary. I'm just talking to Arthur Brooks about his book, The Happiness Files, and we're old dads, and we loved it. And I get to talk to my daughter a lot, and talking to you and Mary Catherine today is like talking to my daughter, and she loves it. And I just think there's so much doom writing out there, and that's why the momwars.substack.com is important for people. Go and subscribe. Now I have to turn gloomy on you, Bethany. I have a column coming out tomorrow for Fox in which you and Seth are mentioned, by the way. Just a little forewarned. Forewarned is forearmed. And I wrote it after reading the crosstabs of the Mamdani electorate. Voters aged 18 to 29 voted for Mamdani 78% over the other two candidates. Voters in the next demo, 30 to 44, went by 2/3 for Mamdani. So that means basically 75% of the electorate under the age of 44 voted for Mamdani. Why?
Why? I mean, I too want free stuff. What's the saying when when I saw that $2,000 tariff refund, I was like, well, I could take $2,000 per member of my family. And my 12-year-old, actually, she was so cute. She's like, or we could use that to pay down the national debt. And I was like,
yeah, oh no. You've got her already trained up in the way you want her to go, but no, take the $2,000 because that's the last thing the government will give you for free.
I know. So I mean, who doesn't want free stuff? The saying is, if you're you're gonna have to help me with it because I'm terrible at sayings. If you're young and conservative, you have no heart. If you're old and liberal, you have no brain. Right?
That's correct. That's
I got it right.
Churchill
there we go.
Originally, but you got it right. Yep.
Yes. So, I mean, that's what it is. They want free stuff. They don't realize there's no such thing as a free lunch.
I just am so disillusioned. I wrote one of the purpose of the column tomorrow, which you and Seth are mentioned, is that people who have platforms need to platform people under the age of 45. And I listed like 10 of them, Guy and Mary Catherine and you and Seth and Matt Continetti and Ben Domenech, people I have on my show all the time, because people from 18 to 44 are much more likely to find and listen to you than they are find and listen to me. And the reality is my demo is probably 45 to 65, the heart of my demo. I got shoulders on either side, everybody does. But do you think there's hope for this generation, or do they have to fail miserably with socialism and communism before they realize it does not work?
I mean, I think there is hope. I wouldn't have had 6 children if I thought everything was hopeless. Having children is an expression of hope in the future. But there is a shocking amount of ignorance among people of my generation when it comes to the fact that socialism has indeed been tried before. We've gone down this road many a times in many a places, and it doesn't ever end well, nor has it ever ended well. And I think a lot of this is poor education. And I'm going to put a little bit of this on the shoulders of your listeners too, because I think a lot of people of our parents' generation thought they were sending us to school and we were getting edumacated, or we were getting
Yeah.
educated. We were in fact getting edumacated. We did not receive an adequate education in these kinds of things. Some of us learned how to do math and reading sufficiently. Our children are not learning that in school sufficiently. But all of these life lessons are not ever being imparted to children. And I think a lot of parents of our parents' generation kind of figured it would happen by default, and they could sort of sit back and by osmosis their kids would learn things. But you have to talk to your children. You have to educate them in your beliefs so that when your 12-year-old hears that they're sending tariff checks, she will say, "What about the national debt?" That doesn't
Yep.
happen by accident. You have to have these conversations with your kids.
Do you also think the decline in traditional religion has something to do with the rise in the belief of socialism, which is itself sort of a Marxist god? It's a belief system, and
Yeah.
if you're committed to a belief system, you go all in.
Yeah. No, I do. I do. They're so desperate to find something that gives them meaning and gives them a sense of community and belonging. And especially post-COVID, I think, when we ripped kids and teenagers and 20-year-olds out of their community and we told them sit in front of a screen and that's your socialization for the next 3 years. Of course they didn't turn out okay. Of course that they're craving belonging. And when Mamdani comes along and he's like, I'm going to give you free stuff and we are all in it together, all of these, it is a sense of faith that these people have that he's going to achieve the miraculous and that they're going to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so from an intellectual perspective, I see the allure of someone like Mamdani.
And my answer, and I'll get your quick commentary on it, is that they're getting their information from 1,000 different places as opposed to 3 channels or 4 channels and 5 newspapers, and they don't read books. So we got to promote people whom they might actually listen to, like the momwars.substack.com. Otherwise, they'll never get anything, right? I think
Yeah.
media is broken beyond, it's not broken. I mean, there's just too much of it. They can't pick.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell the difference between Candace Owens and Ally Beth Stuckey, for example.
Yeah.
But we on the right, and there's been a lot of talk of that this is infighting or not. I don't think it's infighting. I think we need to choose who our players are. And for me, I'm going to go with Ally Beth Stuckey over Candace Owens, who I think is having a mental breakdown. But we need to gatekeep a little bit, and we need to say people like Ben Domenech. He's a good, interesting, smart, captivating voice for young men on the right. Losing Charlie Kirk was an absolute tragedy because he was that. And so we need to be promoting the good ones, and you do that every day on your show. But I mean, we need to see that en masse.
And we need a lot. And by the way, I think it works. I think it's great for ratings. I think people, when I heard the Wall Street Journal had nabbed Matt Continetti, I said, boy, Paul Gigot is on top of it. He's very much on top of it. But we'll keep doing it. We're going to do it by encouraging everyone right now. Go over to themomwars.substack.com, themomwars.substack.com, and subscribe to Bethany and Carrie. Recovering from laryngitis. I don't blame the Josiah Bartlett Center in New Hampshire, but my loss of my voice is coincident with my travel up there. Jonathan Williams, who is president and chief economist at our sponsor, American Legislative Exchange Council, knows the difference between correlation and causation, right, Jonathan? We cannot always link things that happen at the same time as a sequence. But I can link one thing. I want to begin by complimenting your social media team at ALEC. Every time you're coming on, like clockwork, an hour before the show, they post it up. They're really good at this. Where'd you find them?
Well, we got some great team members here at ALEC. We sure do. We're very proud of the great work that they do. And there's a lot of need for that to get the common sense ALEC message out there across the country.
And they do it better than anyone. Here's the bad news. Mr. Mamdani received 78% of the vote of people between the ages of 18 and 30, and 66% of the people between 30 and 44. Why did Mamdani win, and why is his approach that he is proposing so bad?
Well, it's an interesting case study here, Hugh, in that we've got an individual who's running as an open Marxist socialist, and yet his campaign theme centers in a word around one thing, and that was affordability. And when you think about, obviously, if you've been to New York lately, affordability has been a problem for a long time, but certainly something that resonates with folks that can't buy their first home or their first condo in the case of New York, or can't afford that $5,000 a month in a rent to live in Manhattan. And so he's tapping into a unmet need that I think a lot of folks at all age groups, but especially folks at the starting rung of their careers, are grappling with. And that was a smart move by his focus group and slick campaign staff that put his charismatic campaign together. Unfortunately for all of us, and especially for the folks of New York, is that all those big government ideas have been tried before, even in places like New York, and have come up far short, created a whole lot of failure around them. And so I think the challenge for those of us who believe in market-based innovation and ideas that power individuals is to actually come up with a competition of ideas and not just say no, but say, what are these free market things? And of course, as you know well, Hugh, that is exactly what we're up to at ALEC all the time.
Well, I did tell up in New Hampshire, I reminded people about rich states, poor states, and that they're not number one. Utah's number one and Florida's number two. And they grouse a little bit about that, but New Hampshire's near the top. Housing affordability is not going to get better in New York when they expand rent control. In fact, the opposite's going to happen because rent control is a disincentive to building housing and apartments. I don't know why people don't understand that, Jonathan, after all these years. Rent control means fewer apartments and houses. It's not even up for debate.
Well, of course it does. I mean, rent control is one of those boneheaded ideas that fails the basic smell test of Economics 101. We know it doesn't work, and it's not just theory. As you mentioned, Hugh, it's in practice, not just in New York City, but in cities across the country that have tried that approach. A common sense thing that we've been really working on nationally in other states, we've seen, you've heard about the Montana miracle under Governor Gianforte and the legislators there, where they actually addressed the root problem of high housing costs, and that is needed supply-side reforms. There's a government bureaucracy, zoning rules that stand in the way of more supply going on market, and that's exactly what we're looking to address through smart ALEC model policies. But the other thing that you and I have talked about a lot, Hugh, on this show is one of the big drivers of housing costs generally now is property taxes, and that's where we think we have one of the best wins for the free market that we've seen in recent times, and that is our ALEC Truth in Taxation law that we're seeing states pick up across the country to say, let's be honest about what's driving property taxes, and that is government spending. At the heart of the matter, this is a government-caused problem, whether it's supply-side restrictions on housing or taxation and insurance costs.
Well, I know that people can get the details at richstatespoorstates.com. They should get the book, richstatespoorstates.com. It's absolutely free from alec.org/Hugh. You can get it there as well. But Jonathan, on the agenda for when I come down and see you and broadcast live from ALEC on December 2nd and 3rd in Fort Worth, is housing on the agenda? Because I can talk about housing all day long. It's the one thing I know really well.
Well, absolutely. It's going to be all over the agenda. In fact, Texas just did some great housing reform this past session that we're going to be talking about at the conference directly.
Well, as we line up the guests, you guys work with us to line up which people we talk to. You know our favorites, but school choice and housing are my two favorite issues of all. And they doubled the number of Hope scholarships in New Hampshire. Have you publicized that yet? They're very proud.
Absolutely. It's been a huge success. And obviously, when it comes to Texas, $1 billion of education freedom coming to families. Everything's bigger in Texas, Hugh, and we have a lot of great things to talk about.
I'm so looking forward to December 2nd and 3rd. If you want to join us, by the way, there are tickets available at alec.org/Hugh, ALEC.org/Hugh. Great sponsors and great friends. Jonathan Williams, as always, thank you. Get 3/4 of my voice back from my trip to Little Rock, Arkansas, and Manchester, New Hampshire. So I'm going to let Mary Catherine Ham do most of the talking in this segment. Mary Catherine, of course, is the co-host of the Getting Hammered podcast and the Normally podcast. There's a new Getting Hammered that she and Vic Mattis put out, which was fabulous. Mary Catherine, welcome. I want to start by giving you forewarning. You're named in my Fox News column tomorrow as one of the people we've just got to get more on the air because we lost 78% of the vote in New York City of voters between 18 and 30. 66% of the vote, 30 to 45, voted for Mamdani. Clearly, they are not getting good information from people like me, or they're not listening to people like me. I'm too old for them.
Well, I might also be too old for them, but I can give it a shot. I can cosplay slightly younger. But no, look, I think speaking to young people is part of what's required to win elections. Now, are they the most reliable voting bloc? No, but that more 30s to 40s bloc is potentially young families, young singles. They are highly polarized, men versus women, men often leaning right, women leaning left. And speaking to them is tricky because there is a part of this where they feel like their deal with America has been broken. Like they were made a bunch of promises as millennials or Gen Z, and that those promises didn't pan out. And you can sort of blame many different policies and liberals or conservatives for these things, but learning how to speak to those problems to begin with and just acknowledge that you understand that people are having problems without condescending to them, I think is step one. And honestly, it's some of what Trump did with young men. Like his argument was like, I don't hate you. I kind of like some of the things you like. I don't think that you are toxic. Let's build a coalition together, right? But if their lives don't improve as a result of having done that, they will not become reliable voters and they may go the other direction.
So let me ask, how much do you worry about groypers versus communists? Because when I grew up, the communists were real and the Stalinists were real and they were a threat and the Soviet Union were the baddies. And then we kind of got suckered in by the Chi-Coms, making us think that they were good. Deng Xiaoping pulled that off, that they were just going to become us, and they didn't. But now we have no Soviet Union with empty grocery stores to point to, and now allegedly groypers are out there grabbing all those people, or they're either becoming groypers or becoming commies.
Yeah, no, I am concerned because there is a tendency of both movements, it seems to me, on the left and the right to look and be like, we need this younger generation, and the only way to keep them is to sort of indulge or like leave uncommented upon all of the sort of sprinkling and flavor of anti-Semitism and racism that's involved with some of these movements, or the more loud voices within them. And I think that doesn't help. Like, leadership matters. I think one of the reasons that you're seeing a lot of the infighting on the right and the sort of the reemergence of groypers is because Charlie Kirk was a leader who was a bulwark against this tendency with people in this age group. And it makes me even sadder that we lost him in this violent and tragic way, because as a leader, I think he was modeling something very different for young men, for young women, for the people who were excited to be part of TPUSA. On the left, you know, they're fully in on the Mamdani sort of lauding in the New York Times and mainstream arenas. Even Hassan Piker, who I would argue is even more extreme than him, they're happy to laud. So there's a difference in how high these people make it and how much praise they get. I would argue that the left side doesn't really have the infighting so much because they've given over all the power already, and are not interested in leading or educating in any other direction than extreme leftism and socialism.
One of the arguments I've seen made is that the vice president has to take over for Charlie. Well, you know, the vice president's got a real job. He's got a job that requires him 24/7, 365. He cannot do college tours. He can do maybe one college a year, but he can't do college tours. So I think we've just got to have an ecosystem of people who are under 50 and under 30 who are curated almost by people who are over 50.
Yeah, and who have some experience speaking to these things. And again, acknowledging that people are struggling. There's this fine line between acknowledging that people are struggling. I think what the left does too often, and what I don't want the right to do, is acknowledge that people are struggling, but then sort of just enable it, which is what a lot of lefty programs will do, and what I don't want even a populist-leaning, right-leaning Republican Party to do, right? We want people to thrive. We want people to be successful. We want them to build families. We want them to have homes, right? So let's work on doing that instead of sort of indulging the fact that people are feeling in the doldrums about where they might be in life. And by the way, if you're young, you'll have time.
How do we, you're right. How do we do that without indulging? Like, the worst thing Mamdani ran on, the very worst, was rent control. Rent control kills affordability. It's like the silver bullet of affordability and the wooden stake through the heart and the mirror of affordability. You need garlic all around rent control. It does not work. Do you think people 18 to 30 know that? It sounds so good, but it does not work.
I don't think they do. And I think you can't just say socialism bad, socialism doesn't work. I think you have to explain why it doesn't work. We are suffering from generations of lack of economic literacy here, and it will not be rebuilt quickly. It concerns me, especially if you look at the UC San Diego math news that came out this week of all those people having to be in remedial math. The education process will be slow. I'm thankful for places like PragerU and Kite and Key Media who do that type of work that educates people, because people do need to understand that the policies these guys are pushing will do the opposite. And that's what I've hoped to talk about throughout my career. Like, when you throw easy credit from the government at colleges get more expensive because there's no reason to rein it in. You subsidize Obamacare, everyone's care gets more expensive. We're stuck in these loops, and you do have to do a large bit of education of people. I'm thinking about just starting women's book clubs and then handing them basic economics. Like, this one will be fun. Let's have some wine.
A little Thomas Sowell for you. Well, I think that's a good idea, and I want you all to go and listen to Normally. Go like and subscribe Normally wherever you get your podcast, and Getting Hammered. I hope that wasn't the quarterly edition. I hope that was the monthly edition, Mary Catherine, but it was certainly... Oh, good. I know it. You're always working at it. It was fabulous to hear you two together again. It's like a reunion tour of the Eagles, only half their age. I like that. Mary Catherine Ham, follow her on X at MK Hammer. Get her podcast Normally and Getting Hammered. I had a revelation today. A real revelation. Over the 25 years of this program, my sponsors have become friends, and my friends have become friends of each other. Case in point. Rhett and Irene Rasmussen run BestHotGrill.com. BestHotGrill.com. It is, by the way, the best grill made in America. Solaire infrared grill. And when you think about buying a Christmas present for your best clients, and you've got a lot of them, say you got 10 or 12 of them, make the wheel go around in your business. You want to give them something, go to BestHotGrill.com for the holidays. And pick one of the small ones or one of the medium-sized one. If you're going to buy a big one, buy it for yourself. You can try it before you buy it. Best Hot Grill, Solaire infrared grills. Or if you've got a fireplace and you want to dress it up for the holidays, they make world-famous fireballs. They have a free measuring kit if you want to put in a fire log, gas-heated fire log. But I really want you to think about Best Hot Grill. Well, Rhett and Irene have become very good friends of the Fetching Miss Hewitt and I. And at the same time, the author of Turning Small Talk into Big Talk is Jan Gennara. And Jan Gennara's book, Turning Small Talk into Big Talk, became a big bestseller all over the place because a lot of people don't know how to turn small talk into big talk. They don't know the art of actually getting a conversation that's memorable and leaves you feeling satisfied, not angry after dinner. So Rhett and Jan became friends at the Wild Adventure, TWA.US, and Rhett and Glenn became friends there, and Rhett and Dwayne became friends there, and Jan and Dwayne became friends. I just like it. It's an ecosystem, but I do love that they're sponsors, and so I want to give them their due. Go and get the book, Turning Small Talk into Big Talk. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or at jansbooks.com, jansbook.com, Jan's Books. They're both plural. JANSBOOKS, jansbooks.com is where you'll get Turning Small Talk into Big Talk. And you can get it read before Thanksgiving dinner. Don't have to sweat Thanksgiving dinner. It's got all the questions laid out for you, by the way. It gets you through the narrows, gets you through the rapids, and read it and be ready for it. But you can also start right now to make a list of who. You got a bunch of clients. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great, but you want to take care of a few of them. Even if they're bad clients, if they pay their bills, you got to take care of them. I'm talking particularly to lawyers. You got to remember that. And you got to remember Relief Factor. So BestHotGrill.com, Relief Factor does not go on the BestHotGrill.com. Relief Factor goes into me. Will not help my voice, but it will, however, help the rest of me. And I take it every day. In the first hour of the show, and if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you see me do it, or you can hear me do it on all my 400 affiliates, and the reason is very simple. Relief Factor works to get rid of the minor aches and pains. Cannot get rid of laryngitis, but does get rid of achy muscles, backs, necks, the dreaded overhead bin. I was on 4 sets of flights, 5 different airplanes over the last week. And I'm okay. I can do whatever I did beforehand. I haven't been able to get walking. It's too cold, and I don't want to get the laryngitis worse. But besthotgrill.com, relieffactor.com, jansbooks.com. All of them worth your time, worth your money. Call 1-800, number 4 in the word relief, or go to relieffactor.com. In hour 1, I began to play for you my interview with Dr. Arthur Brooks, columnist for The Atlantic, professor at Harvard Business School, about his brand new book, The Happiness Files. And then I cut off because I wanted to save the rest of it for this hour. I was just about to raise with Arthur the question of why failure can sometimes not be that bad and why we don't want to catastrophize it. Let's go back to the conversation with Arthur Brooks about The Happiness Files. Let's talk about catastrophic failure or catastrophizing failure and why maladaptive misery is so dangerous. I thought that was a great reveal, Arthur.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the truth of the matter is that Homo sapiens, we almost every weird thing that we do actually comes from the evolved evolutionary environment. So we still have brains that were made for us about 250,000 years ago. They're not very different at all. That's in the early Pleistocene, when Homo sapiens lived in roving bands of 30 to 50 individuals that were extremely hierarchical and kin-based. And what you were paying attention to all day long was how to rise in the hierarchy, how to stay close to your kin, and how to avoid disaster. Those are your 3 big things that you were doing all day long. And avoiding disaster meant that you had to pay attention to threats a lot more than to opportunities. So opportunities are great. You know, find some berries on a bush. You find a couple of gazelles around a watering hole. That's terrific. That'll make your day. But you really, really want to be attuned to all kinds of negative emotions like fear and anger and disgust, which is your way to avoid pathogens, and sadness, so you don't get kicked out of your tribe because you'll die immediately. And so the result is we have more brain tissue dedicated to negative emotions than we do to positive emotions, about 2 to 1. That's why everybody is such an ungrateful wretch all the time. I mean, me too. I teach the science of happiness. I teach neuroscience of happiness. And I found myself saying the other day, you know, first class on United Airlines has really gone downhill. And I thought, oh, man, listen to you. You know, it's like you should be grateful. But that's why gratitude is hard and ingratitude is easy because of this negativity bias. But if we let it run, man, if we let it run, then what it's going to do is we're going to catastrophize everything. We're going to be miserable all the time. And that means we need to live in the space, not of our animal impulses, but of our moral aspirations. We need to stand up to Mother Nature and say, no, I will not catastrophize. I will not be negative. I will not be ungrateful. I'm going to make a positive effort to live in the parts of my brain that are not emphasized according to evolution, but we can emphasize them by our own volition, our own modern selves.
Now, I want to get to the trophy wall, Arthur. I have seen a lot of trophy walls in my time. I've got the makings of one, but I've never put it up because I think it's almost embarrassing when people would see it. You know, it's shaking hands with W, shaking hands with RN, that sort of stuff. But you had quite a great reflection on vanity walls. Would you share that with people? And I don't mean to condemn anyone that's got it, but it might be what's bothering them. So let's tell them about it.
Yeah, that's right. And what vanity walls basically are a kind of a monument to your past successes. And there's this theory out there that when you're having a kind of a down day, if you look to your past successes, you'll say, I'm not such a loser. Look, I met the president. I shook hands with the Pope. You know, the governor, I had a citation from the governor for having the best car dealership in Western Iowa, whatever it happened to be. Right. And that's great. The trouble with it is that actually they bring you down. And the reason is you're constantly comparing yourself to others and even to yourself. And when you look at past successes, especially in moments where you're not enjoying current successes, what it makes you think is, man, I used to be the king of the mambo. And, you know, now look at me. Now that I'm, you know, things aren't going so great for my car dealerships in Western Iowa. That's not so good. I mean, for me, I could have pictures of me shaking hands with the Pope and I would say, look at that hair. I had hair like Hugh Hewitt, but not anymore. And that's an invidious comparison. When you make a comparison with yourself and you realize that something was going better for you in the past, that's the opposite of progress. And human beings only get consistent satisfaction from making positive progress.
You had some kind of really great term that was so scientific sounding, it was designed to impress. I mean, I was blown away by it. Do you remember which term I'm talking about?
No, I don't, because there's a lot in these days.
Self-referential
30% of what it teaches.
I'll find it
Self-referential
at
what?
some point. I'll find it at
No,
some
I
point.
mean,
I
it's
want to
like-
move on.
I'm an academic.
I want to move. Yeah, and you want to produce stuff that gets into the journals, and I wrote that down and I loved it. Let's talk about learning to say no. It's a problem for
Yeah.
me, so I want to learn how to get the yes bias going.
Yeah, so this is the thing. Strivers, which, boy, you're a striver par excellence, Hugh. I've never seen you still, and you're at a time of your life where a lot of guys are playing golf, but you're traveling to a new state every single day, and you've got the podcast, you've got the show, you're I mean, you're adjudicating presidential debates. You're everywhere all the time. That's what strivers actually do. Strivers have two big fears. They have two major fears. Number one is failure, and number two is idleness. Idleness, they hate idleness. They hate idleness even more than they hate busyness. Now, if you come to me in some years, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years in the future and say, hey, Arthur, can you help me design my retirement? I've done that for a lot of really successful people. I'm kind of the billionaire whisperer at this point. And I would say, yeah, let's talk about it. I'd say, what's the thing about your schedule you hate the most? And I know what it is. You're too busy. You don't have time to do a lot of things that you actually want. You don't even have time between meetings to pee. And that's not great. So I would say what we're going to do is we're going to keep you busy, but we're going to give you more time between the things. So we're going to actually create not so much connective tissue between everything. So you got a little bit more space. And then I'll start slowly weeding out your schedule, because we have to get over your fear of idleness. Now, that fear of idleness is made manifest during your career in an inability to say no. Why? Because, if you say no to something, maybe that nothing will fill that slot on your calendar, and you'll just be some loser in 7 months, which is why if you come to me and say, hey, old buddy, how about if you come and give a speech at my granddaughter's bar mitzvah and make some balloon animals in Fairbanks in February? What do you say? Yeah. I'll say, yes, I would love to do that, because I'm afraid that 7 months from now, I'm going to have a hole in my schedule, and that freaks me out. And that's what you got to get over.
And we also, if I remember correctly, we overestimate the rejection that will follow from saying no. In other words, we credit ourselves with too much worth, and we don't credit the person making the ask with enough maturity to understand no is sometimes necessary.
That's right. Most of the time we overestimate when we say no. Somebody asks us to do something and we say no. They say, oh, okay. They say, that's okay. That's fine. You say, can you come and give a talk at the church? And you say, no, I can't do it that day. They say, okay, maybe I'll ask you next time. And you say, fine. But in the moment you're thinking, well, that's really going to put a crimp in that particular relationship, because it's going to bug them. And part of that is just that we have big egos. We think that their whole event or whatever it is resting on our particular presence. And what was they said, I think I'm going to get Arthur to come talk at that thing. I'm going to ask Hugh if he can, do that thing. And then, and when you say no, they say they'll move on to the next idea, is kind of how it works. You shouldn't worry so much about it, because for the most part, I hate to say it, it's almost a bigger problem. People don't care.
People don't care. Now, I took a lot of interest in your genetic evolutionary acceptance, as I did. I had 1974, one of my classes, we had to read The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. It made a lot of sense to me then. It's not at all incongruent with believing in Jesus Christ. It just isn't. People who think you can't believe in evolution and be a Christian are just wrong. But the evolutionary techniques that developed over millennia are not particularly good for the acceleration of the technology with which we live today. And I think what you're really getting at in the happiness files is, how do we get rid of the bad evolutionary techniques that were really great, maybe even 7,000 years ago, but not today?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the truth is, evolution is a marvel, and it made it possible for the ancient Hewitts to pass on their genes such that you can do the marvelous stuff that you do today. But it doesn't actually, number one, lead to adaptive and proper and even healthy behaviors today, because a lot of the stuff is maladapted, kind of like this tendency to be suspicious, hostile, and ungrateful and sad, when most of life is actually really wonderful, because we live in America and we're actually not under threat most of the time. And the other part is just remembering that Mother Nature and evolution, they don't care at all about your happiness. Mother Nature couldn't care less. Mother Nature has only two goals for you, which is survival and gene propagation. That's why I teach what I do, so that people can understand that they were given this marvelous prefrontal cortex. That's the executive center of your brain, the brain tissue right behind your forehead. That's the C-suite. That's the console of tissue where you make conscious decisions about whether or not you're going to act according to your animal impulses, or whether you're going to act according to your moral aspirations. And you got to make decisions all the time. So how do you make decisions? The answer is, number one, you have to be informed. The reason I write about the science of happiness all the time right now is I want people to be informed. I want them to take a real kind of a scholarly interest in themselves and in their brains and in their biology and in their psychology. And people find it super fascinating because they realize they have a lot more control than they ever knew. And then when they do that, they can actually consciously change their habits. They can teach other people. And they'll say, wow, I used to do this thing just without even thinking about it. Now I don't do that. I'm so much happier. I hear that every day from people.
Every day he hears it, and we're going to keep talking about it right after the break. You in the break can go over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and get the Happiness Files, and you will be so much happier when you've read the Happier Files, I guarantee it. I think Adam's pretty clever. Adam played my favorite bump because we're talking about happiness. This really is my favorite bump, partly because it's a redo of a tune from my youth, and it's also part of the Guardians of the Galaxy gig. Let's continue my conversation with Arthur Brooks, which I talked to yesterday about his brand new book, The Happiness Files. Two questions unrelated to happiness. Number one, the audio version of The Happiness Files, which I actually paid for because I wanted to listen to the book while I was doing all this traveling this weekend. You read the intro, and then you had a professional narrator do the rest. Why did you make that choice? Because you were fabulous in the intro.
Oh, I appreciate that an awful lot. Generally speaking, I read all my own books, and I'm starting a series of these column-based books, but sometimes they run into what I'm doing for the other big books. And I had this great big book on the meaning of life that's coming out in March, and I was so hot and heavy in the last chapters, and you know how it is when you're in the final edits of a book where your wife is passing pizzas under the door to you at 2:00 in the morning, that there was just no time to do anything else. So that it was nothing more than a time constraint.
And then I did not know until I read the Happiness Files that you were, as I once was, a smoker. I smoked from age 20 to 40. Why? When did you smoke? How much did you smoke? And why did you quit?
So I started using tobacco, actually by using chewing tobacco when I was a kid, when I was 13 years old. And, stupid, a little bit of adolescent rebellion. And I got hopelessly hooked in about 30 days because your brain is highly plastic, meaning that addictions, they rip through, man, when you're that particular age. And I used tobacco in various forms, mostly smoking by the time I was 18 or 19 until I was 26. And then I had an event that actually got my attention. I knew I needed to quit smoking. It was bad for me. I was actually a professional classical French horn player. I used my lungs. That wasn't going to go anywhere good. It made my parents sad. It was just stupid. And I knew I had to quit. And I tried 1,000 times. I didn't have the willpower for it. And I kept going back and back and back. And then I got married. And it was, we were sleeping in our new bed, and I was being a real grown up. And my problem was I was such an inveterate smoker, Hugh. I just couldn't go. I couldn't even go all night. And so I would wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning, and I would smoke a cigarette. And it was just hopeless. And so one night at 4:00 in the morning, I smoked a cigarette, and I didn't finish it before I went back to sleep. And I woke up in the morning, and there were about 10 holes burned in my bed with my wife in the bed. And I said to myself, buddy boy, it's one thing to kill yourself. It's another thing to kill your soulmate. And I quit.
Okay. That's a very dramatic, much better story than mine, which is my brother told me I could recover lung capacity and run faster in marathons if I quit smoking, which I did not know. All right, let's talk about money.
Also true.
Arthur, I thought your talk about money, between $50,000 and $200,000 a year, is less stressful than under 50 or over 200K. So it's kind of a sweet spot for income. I expand on that because that will shock a lot of people.
Yeah. So what happens between, $50,000 and $200,000 a year is you eliminate the sources of hassle and stress from your life. Systematically, you do that. And I remember that. I mean, I remember from 19 to 25 when I was a professional horn player, I didn't even go to the dentist. I didn't have any health care. I couldn't go to the dentist, and I needed to go to the dentist. Then at 25, I took a job in a symphony orchestra, and I had benefits, and I had some money for the first time. And I went to the dentist, and he filled 12 cavities, and I felt better. I thought, wow, money buys happiness. It doesn't. It eliminates the sources of avoidable unhappiness. That's all money ever does for you, unless you're doing something like improving your relationships with it. But that's a special case. We could talk about that if you want. Now, the problem is, when you're making a lot of money, 200,000, 250,000, millions of dollars a year, for the most part, you're doing something for money that's net stress inducing in your life, and you're no longer eliminating sources of unhappiness. And the result of it is net, it's actually not that helpful for you unless you know how to spend it. And that means not actually making it so that you can pay for the Ferrari or make the mortgage payment that's a little bit beyond your means because you're trying to impress the neighbors or trying to impress yourself, trying to be a big shot. Rather, what you're doing is you're actually making it so that you can have experiences with people that you love. You can buy time and use the time doing something that's meaningful and service-oriented, that you're putting it in a bank for intergenerational wealth or to have security in the future, which is something that will bring a lot of happiness, or to give it away. To give it away to your church, giving it away to people who actually need it. Those are the 4 ways that money over $200,000 won't make your life worse. It'll make your life better.
And the fact that you stress giving it away repeatedly throughout the book in the happiness files impresses me because it's congruent with my experience, but it's also been told to me about 1,000 times, and it's always true. Yeah. I did not expect Schopenhauer to be in your book, Arthur. Did you, when you set out to write the column that he appears in? Or Jung, for that matter. I didn't think Carl Jung would get all that praise.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the interesting thing about actually being a weekly columnist, as you know, is that you're always learning. It's like being in graduate school again. So I read 15 to 20 academic journal articles a week. And it's like I'm working on my PhD again. It's just an extraordinary thing. And I just love it. It keeps me fertile and young intellectually, et cetera. And I'm also always branching into areas that I don't have a background in. So my PhD is as a behavioral scientist. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I've had to retrain in the academic literature on neuroscience. But I've also had to retrain understanding philosophy in ways that I never did before. You know, there's serious philosophy and, you know, different schools of thinking. And the reason for that is this. All the best questions in happiness come from philosophy and theology. Then you have to understand the mechanism of action, which is how the brain works. Because psychology is just biology, and so you need to know neuroscience. And then you have to look at actually how it stands up in people's lives, and that's the psychology before you actually even give advice to people how to live differently. So once every 5 or 6 weeks, I read an essay about a philosopher I've always wanted to know about, but didn't. And one of them was about Jung, and a couple of them have been about Schopenhauer, this 19th century crank who was grouchy about everything and had a terrible relationship with his parents, and people didn't like him, and he wasn't even esteemed or respected during his lifetime. But since he died, people have looked back on it and said, wow, this guy's done some really, really significant things in terms of understanding how life works. And I have a newfound respect for the old crank just by reading his work to learn about it.
Well, pause right there. Pause right there. You've got to go over to my YouTube channel to get the rest of Arthur. And there's still some more of Arthur. Probably, how much minutes left, Adam? 5, 7? 5 minutes left. And I'm going to make you go to the YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt YouTube. And when you're there, please like and subscribe. All right, I'm at 98,800 people. And the moment we hit 100,000, the algorithm says, oh, we've got to push that out more. And then more people, especially people in the demo that voted for Mamdani, anyone who voted for Mamdani, might actually get some clear thinking from people like Arthur Brooks and me about that and about Relief Factor. They are a sponsor of this program. I love my Relief Factor. I can do those crazy 5 days trips with 4 cities in it because of Relief Factor, because the dreaded overhead bin doesn't slow me down. I don't mind sitting in airports because I always got something to listen to or read. And the seat can be broken. It doesn't matter. The bed might be not that great, and it doesn't matter to me because of Relief Factor. So get that for yourself. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. You get a 3-week starter pack for $19.95, 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. And you take 3 a day for the first week, 2 a day for the second week, and then you do what I do, once a day for every week thereafter, unless you've done something bad, like throwing your back out. My back's fine. It was bad last week. It's back to being normal. I credit Relief Factor. Give it a try. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website. The 3-week starter pack is there as well at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Joined by the one and only Comfortably Smug, one of the fellows on the Ruthless podcast, which you should be listening to the 3 times a week it comes out. Smug, I'm so glad to talk to you today because I did a deep dive into the demographic crosstabs of Mr. Mamdani's win. Do you know that 78% of voters under 30 voted for him and 66% of voters under 45 voted for him? That's not my demo. That's your demo. So how are you going to save that demo, Smug?
Simple. I would say that it's clear for most voters that President Trump has had a positive impact on this country since he became president. We saw, first off, having a president who is fully cognizant is a huge improvement over Joe Biden. But a lot of the successes that President Trump can tout, especially the ones that voters can see communicated to them, are foreign policy wins. I mean, you know, as he had done in his first administration, President Trump has brought peace back to the Middle East. President Trump has ended like a half dozen wars. He has done a tremendous amount on the foreign policy stage. However, voters have not seen economic relief that impacts them. Most of all, young voters, voters who every day are treated to news stories that AI is going to take your job, you are not going to be able to succeed, housing market is not reachable for you, you will never own a home, you will never own anything. And those concerns make individuals desperate enough, in this case in New York, to vote for a communist. And throughout the arc of history, you see whenever times get desperate enough for individuals who feel like they have no say in a system, they go to extremes. You saw the Cultural Revolution in China, and that, to me, is a tremendous comparison between what happened in New York City, where it was the college students and the college professors who led the charge. The higher an income level the higher an education attainment level among voters in New York City, the higher the likelihood they voted for Mamdani.
Yep. And he won the young and he won the super educated, or at least people with high degrees. I happen to believe that Ruthless and a handful of other people speak directly into that vibe. I hate that word, but I'm going to use it. Into the people who are 18 to 40 years old, because they're not going to listen to me and they're not going to read the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. Do you agree with me on that, Smug?
Well, first off, they should listen to you because you always make sense. And it's great to learn from people who have experience and who know what they're talking about. But I think right now it's become almost an acid test for young individuals where if someone is speaking to my economic concerns, if anyone is speaking to my economic anxiety in the first 10 seconds I hear them, I'll keep listening. If not, they will tune out. So the saying used to be that you can't count on young people to turn out to vote. That has changed. Young people are now turning out to vote. The thing is, it's incredibly easy to lose their attention. It's incredibly easy to lose their loyalty because they've grown up in an economic environment where there is no loyalty, where companies are very quick to lay off and say that, you know what, we're going to start hiring, we're going to replace these positions with AI, even before AI is capable of doing the job. Like, we're seeing companies now when they're reporting earnings being like, well, we expected AI to have more of an impact, so we're actually going to start hiring people.
Well, it's very interesting about the AI bubble, and I think there are going to be a couple of big winners and a lot of losers there. But I think, again, it comes down to there's just simple demographic reality is those of us who are pushing up against 70, we might get some really smart young kids, but we're not going to have the language or even the access to the platforms. I think the big revolution on the right is partly about people who are sequestered in deep wells of misinformation. And they're not going to come drink from my well, but they're going to come drink from your well. When you do your production meetings before a show, do you ever talk about that, hitting the demo?
100%. I think you're seeing after the election that happened in New York and in Virginia, that President Trump, clearly the White House got the message that economic concerns are at the forefront. You're seeing J.D. Vance went out there and he laid it out very well. This administration has gotten the memo. They understand that if this midterm, the only issue that matters is economic concerns. And young voters are going to play a significant part of that. And also, for those of us in the conservative movement, that is the issue to focus on more than anything, more than any differences we may have with each other, more than anything we take our time up with. We have to address the economic concerns, not only of the young people, but of all Americans, because Joe Biden ran this country into a ditch. It was a mess, and we're going to get ourselves out of it together.
I think you're right. I think we're going to package this and send this to every podcaster and every media influencer, no matter what platform they're working on. They got to listen to the Ruthless podcast to learn how to do it. It's got to be funny. It's got to be fast. It's got to have humor. It's got to have games. You get all that at Ruthless Podcast. So go like and subscribe over at Ruthless. Smug, always good to see and talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Talk to you again in a month.
Thank you.
I do have to cover two things. The government is reopening tonight because the House has voted on the rule that will reopen the government and the continuing resolution through January 30th. Thank goodness the Democratic stunt is over. A lot of people needed to get paid. I talked to a few TSA workers in my travels over the last 4 or 5 days, and you miss 2 paychecks and you're in a world of hurt. If you're in the middle class, even if you're in the upper middle class, you miss 2 paychecks, you're in a world of hurt. Most people don't keep a lot of cash on hand with the expectation they're not going to get paid for 2 pay periods. But Chuck Schumer, AOC, they did that. And it's over tonight because of Leader Thune in the Senate, Speaker Johnson and his team, Majority Leader Scalise, everybody, Tom Emmer. In the House, it's over. That's good. You are also going to see a lot of headlines about Epstein. Let me set it up this way. 2 weeks ago, Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I were driving along one of Virginia's many fine interstates, and we stopped at one of the rest stops. And I was standing around, and I had on my Browns hat, which is pretty hard to miss because it's an orange helmet. Everybody who follows football knows the Browns helmet. And a guy was behind a desk with VDOT info, Virginia Department of Transportation. He said, hey, are you from Cleveland? I said, sorta. He said, well, so am I. How about them Browns? And we both commiserated. And I said, where are you from in Cleveland? He said, in Ohio. He said, Warren. Youngstown Warren is what he said. He actually said Youngstown Warren. I said, oh, really? I'm from Warren. He said, well, I'm from Warren. I said, where'd you go to high school? He said, Champion. And I said, well, I went to Kennedy. And then we talked about Champion and Kennedy. And then we went on our merry way, shook hands. He'd worked for the police department in Southern Virginia, and he moved over to VDOT and was manning one of their information booths. And so I knew him in the way the people of Warren know people of Warren, right? Now, Donald Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein because Epstein was part of the rich Palm Beach. I've never set foot in Palm Beach. I don't know anything about it, but I know a lot of rich people live there. It's like Indian Wells and the Beverly Hills and places like that. Lots and lots of rich people live there. And they tend to know each other. They go to the same parties. There is an attempt by Democrats to smear Donald Trump. I want you to know that the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, who was a criminal, horrible human being, who I think hung himself because he would rather be dead than be alive when the details of how horrible he was came out. The victims of Epstein sued everyone that they could sue. They got $290 million from J.P. Morgan Bank. They got $75 million from Deutsche Bank. Bank of America has settled with them. I don't know the amount. So, point being, plaintiffs' lawyers were involved on behalf of the victims. If Donald Trump had any guilt whatsoever, he would have been named and sued, and he was not named and sued. I've looked at the emails they released today. They do not do anything to implicate Donald Trump. In fact, they exonerate Donald Trump. Michael Wolff cannot be trusted about anything. And the email from Michael Wolff to Jeffrey Epstein should best be read as, let's cook up some lies about Donald Trump to get the spotlight off of you. The other email that was released that doesn't say anything about Trump other than a blacked out name, new Trump, and then another email said the dog that didn't bark is Trump. They're all exculpatory. And Democrats think, like the shutdown, they think that they can do the shutdown and blame Republicans for it, and we're stupid. And we're not stupid. We know Democrats did it. And they think that they can say, Trump had something to do with Epstein when he didn't have anything to do with Epstein beside the way that I know the guy in Warren, or I know everyone in John F. Kennedy High School. It's a social circle, and doesn't mean I participated in any criminal activity anyone did. There's no proof, but there were lawsuits, many, many lawsuits by many, many plaintiffs' lawyers that would have loved to have sued Donald Trump, would have loved to have sued Donald Trump. And we know about that. There's no there. And they're talking about it because they don't have any ideas, and Obamacare is a complete and total failure. And right now, people are getting their insurance numbers, and it's staggering how badly Obamacare is broken. Staggering. It's the heart of the affordability problem. Most young people are not going to even buy Obamacare, the cheapest insurance, because they can't afford it. So affordability is because of Democrats. If you want to answer, if you really want an abundance agenda, you trust the free market. The answer to high prices is high prices. People produce more of what is that which will gain more money. Let builders build. Let apartment builders build apartments. Let the market work. But the Democrats don't want you to hear that. So they're holding out this nonsense about Epstein. They're holding on anything they can hold on to. Because Mamdani, by the way, is a terrible false positive for them. Because most people don't live in New York City and don't want to. They want to live in the town. 90% of Americans live within 50 miles of where they were born. 60% live within 10 miles of where they were born. They ain't moving to New York City. I had to do that once in 1980. It's an unpleasant experience if you're living on a small income. I was a ghostwriter and editor for President Nixon. I wasn't making a lot of money. It was tough to find a place to live. I had to get a shared apartment. And it's never going to change because lots of young people move to New York and housing isn't being built. And one of the reasons housing isn't being built is rent control. Because landlords don't want to they'll build condos that you can buy, but they're not going to build apartments and have rent control imposed on them. That's why it's so expensive to get an apartment in New York. And that is all you need to know about Epstein, the government shutdown, and why it is so expensive to live in New York. I wish I had more of a voice. I'd go longer at it, but I don't have more of a voice. Let me take a moment to tell you about one of our great sponsors, WebRoot. If you don't have WebRoot, you're not protected online. WebRoot Total Protection. It's the season for stealing. People go online, they use public internet, they become vulnerable, they use old passwords, they're too lazy to change them, it's too hard to change them, they don't know how to use System Optimizer. Get webroot.com/Hewitt, ask for the Total Protection Plan. One person, 5 devices, or if you got a family, 10 people, 10 devices. And WebRoot will protect them all. You'll get all sorts of the things that you need to keep the baddies out of your internet account so that they don't know how to steal your money from your bank account. I think more people were shocked on this program than have ever been shocked before when Victor Davis Hanson, one of the smartest guys we know, revealed he'd been looted by a cyber crook. Now, he got his money back. I'm sure VDA banks have to make good when somebody steals from your bank account. But you don't want to have to go through that. You want to stop it before it starts. That's webroot.com/Hewitt. Ask for the Total Protection Plan. That's what you need. That's what you deserve. You don't want to go through identity theft. You don't want to fall for a phishing scam. You don't want any of those fake text emails that look really real to get through. Get webroot.com/Hewitt. Get the Total Protection Plan. I've got almost my voice back, but it's only good for about 3 minutes at a pop. And then it falls away by tomorrow. It should be back 100%. So, Generalissimo, I'm going to let you tell people about my PhDweightLoss.com without me saying anything other than 864
644
1900.
That's 864
644
1900.
Take it away, Dwayne.
So, this is a program where you don't have to do shots the rest of your life. You don't have to do anything crazy medical. This is good nutrition where you are hooked up with a nutritionist at myPhDweightLoss.com who will look at your schedule, look at what your likes are, what your dislikes are, and craft a meal plan and help you with the meal plan to get you to the desired weight loss you need. I lost 50 pounds in 12 weeks, which is not too shabby. Kept most of it off because that's the important thing is any diet can lose weight. The trick is keeping it off. And that's kind of where the folks at MyPhD excel. They help you keep the weight off. Worked for me for the last 3 years. I'm sure it'll work for you too.
864
644
1900. That's
864
644
1900.
Or you can go to myPhDweightLoss.com. Tell me, is Dwayne's World coming out soon?
We have a new edition of Dwayne's World out this morning with Jim Talent, and we dive into not just the shutdown, but the suggestion about the 50-year mortgage. Jim Talent's against it. I made the Socratic argument for it, although it doesn't solve the underlying problem. And then we get into the underlying problem of the housing.
How long is the pod?
About an hour.
Yeah. Dwayne's World, if you have not liked and subscribed to it, you should, especially when he sits down with Lilacs and with Jim Talent. Jim Talent really knows a lot of stuff.
He sure does.
And really does he talk about it at length because we're always in 5, 7, 9-minute segments. But with Dwayne, he sits back and regales you with wisdom, and it really is wisdom. And Dwayne's pretty good at that, too. So Dwayne's World can be found where, Dwayne?
DwayneWorld.com. DUANE World.com.
Did your parents know when they named you Dwayne that there are like 18 ways to spell Dwayne?
There was really about 2 when I was born. All these other ways are really kind of new iterations and new incarnations of it. There was DWAYNE and there was
D apostrophe WAYE. The apostrophe W-A-Y-N-E.
That didn't
Dwayne.
exist. That didn't exist back in the 60s.
It's big now.
Well, it's
but
big
you
now.
are good old-fashioned Dwayne, D-U-A-N-E.
The old waspy way, yes.
DwayneWorld.com.
Right.
DwayneWorld.com, or wherever you get your podcast. Sign up for it and enjoy it. And please go over to my YouTube channel and Hugh Hewitt YouTube. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. I can see it. I can almost taste it. But 1,200 of you people, there are a million of you. There are a million of you. Can I get 1,200 of you to just say, okay, I'll do it tonight because he drives me home every night and it's usually pretty entertaining most of the time. Informative and entertaining. I'm coming right back with Amit Segal. I interviewed him yesterday, part 1. Part 2 about this book, A Call at 4 a.m. The 13 decisions made by prime ministers of Israel that were the toughest ones ever made and what we learned about Israel from them. Amit Segal is Israel's most influential journalist of the center right. It's on television every night on their most watched station, Channel 12. Amit had a book come out in English last month, October 12th, A Call at 4 a.m., which I absolutely inhaled when I finally got it. And I talked to Amit yesterday for part 1 of our interview about this. This is part B of part 1, Amit Segal. I did not know until I read your book that he fell into a profound depression after his wife died. I really had no idea. I don't know how. I follow Israeli politics like I follow British politics. They're our 2 most important allies, so I follow them very, very closely. But I had no idea that he actually sunk deeper and deeper into depression. And your story of when he announced his resignation, that's wild. Is that well and widely known in Israel?
Depends how old are you. People who are older than 50 might remember it. And the amazing thing about Menachem Begin was that he fought for 29 consecutive years and 8 consecutive election campaigns to become a prime minister. And then once he was elected, the last year of his term was spent in him wishing to not being a prime minister. And when he left office with the eternal words in Hebrew, I can't do this job anymore. Ineni yachol in Hebrew, he resigned and went to his home and never left the door. The door. He never left out of the door of his apartment.
What a remarkable story. People, that's one reason they should read The Call at 4 a.m. Let me talk to you about Tommy Lapid. Of course, I've followed Yair Lapid over the last many years in his rise and his brief prime ministership, but I'd never heard of his father. And that's a wild kind of character. He sounds like a wild kind of character. Was he well liked and just endured, or was he disparaged and distance given to him?
It depends what time of his career. He was by far someone to spend a life sentence with, full of amazing stories. I'll give you just one story, which is extremely unpolitically correct. He was a Holocaust survivor, and then he was invited to the new to watch the new movie Holocaust by Claude Lanzmann. It was a 9-hour-long movie, and it was screened for the first time in Tel Aviv. And then Claude Lanzmann, after the first screening, asked him, "Well, how was the movie?" So Tommy replied, "The Holocaust was faster for me." So what I'm trying to say is that Tommy was a bigger than life figure, but he was very arrogant from time to time. And his son Yair, it was the all Israeli guy. Yair was the Marlboro guy of Israel. And when Lapid the father was about to pass away, he called his son, 2 generations of journalists in the family, and he told him, "Yair, I was only deputy prime minister, but you are going to be a prime minister." And Lapid became a prime minister, ultimately.
Now, I want you to unpack for the American public that's listening. I thought it was a very important sentence. The Israeli center is not a place, but a state of mind, one located between Judaism and democracy, nationalism and liberalism. So is there a Israeli center?
Yes, I think most of the Israelis, I'll put it differently, that the most popular video or the most popular tweet from Israel in 2025 wasn't about Gaza, or Lebanon, it was just 20 seconds of Israelis in the Tel Aviv beach. And all of a sudden, you see something which is similar in the middle of the Iran war. And all of a sudden, the world could see that Israel is not a messianic state or a pariah state or New Sparta or a religious Jerusalem. It's just a Western democracy full with people who love life, who love to their families and restaurants, and love to spend time with their beloved ones. And they happen to find themselves in the world's most dangerous corner, and yet they succeed of being both Athens and Sparta simultaneously. So yes, the Israeli center does exist. And if you don't believe it,
Now,
you should come to Israel.
I've been there twice, but not long enough to dive into this. For example, you distinguish national religious people from Orthodox people from ultra Orthodox people, and it's a revelation to me that these distinctions are so fine. And Shosh, I had no idea. I hope I'm pronouncing things right. Shosh, I I had no idea the pivotal role they played or Derry played. I don't think any of your allies actually know the complexity of Israeli politics. Do you think the Biden White House, the Bush White House, the Obama White House, or the Trump White House really knows Israel?
They thought they knew. You know, there is a story about Israeli journalists visiting the White House only to get lectured about the different streams within Shas. I don't think the
Huh?
White House is aware of, peculiarities in the French political system, for instance. But Israel was always strong. But my purpose in the book was to make Americans understand that Israel is not a black box that spits decisions about security or wars or military operations from time to time. It's a very complex society with contradicting values: Judaism, democracy, being a Westerner but in the Middle East, trying to live in a neighborhood that speaks Arabic but thinking more about London than Gaza. And these complexities are very important for people in order to understand, for instance, that their problem is not necessarily with Benjamin Netanyahu. If they have problems with Netanyahu, so from time to time they are going to have problems with other Israelis as well. And if they have problems with the government's way of thinking, they should think about who are the millions that support this very same policy and trying to talk to them rather than to an imaginary state of Israel that never existed. You know, when I read Thomas Friedman, for instance, from the New York Times, I always think that I guess I would like this Israel as well, but it does not exist. It ceased to exist many,
So
many
now
years ago.
I found the one guy who reads Thomas Friedman. It's Amit Segal. Who knew? Let
I
me
don't
ask you
really.
when you sit down at the desk each night. I guess you're Channel 12. What do you think of is your job? What is your job as a analyst on Israeli television?
Okay, so first of all, the most basic rule is to report the news. However, we know that phones, internet, Telegram, WhatsApp are way faster these days than television. So I think it's about giving meaning. It's about explaining people a complex situation in 60 seconds, in 90 seconds. And I would like to add something more than this, because in Israel, Channel 12 represents something that I think vanished in the United States. Um, and this is something, or it's a news channel that is supposed to be broadcasting to every single Israeli. In the States, you have CNN for the left, Fox News for the right wing, etc., etc. In Israel, Channel 12 still tries to be the all Israeli channel, something like Walter Cronkite in the 60s in the States. And I think it's a very important mission, because if we cannot hold the center in Israel, we're doomed, because the United States can allow itself, barely allow itself, this situation of divisiveness, because you have two oceans protecting you and 10,000 nuclear ballistic missiles. Israel is a villa in the jungle, unprotected, and we cannot allow ourselves to be split into two different nations. So my mission is definitely speaking to each and every Israeli. So even if we do not agree, we can actually at least have the debate. Maybe it's biting off more than one can chew for one journalist or one channel, but I'm still optimistic.
Well, when we set up part 2 of A Call at 4 a.m., I want to get into Ehud Barak, Ehud Olmert. There's so many interesting people in here, but I want to conclude by saying, when you walk around Israel, wait, let's pause there. We'll come back and we'll play that after the break. Meantime, let me tell you about Relief Factor. I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and I just forgot to say at the end of it last time, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. You can get all the information there that you need. And I want you to hear what Hakeem Jeffries said today about the shutdown that will end tonight, cut number 3.
This fight for us is not partisan. It's not a partisan fight. It's a patriotic fight. We're waging this fight on behalf of the American.
Oh, you betcha. Not paying the TSA people is very patriotic. Not paying everyone who supports the Pentagon in a civilian role, that's very patriotic. AOC on CNN, cut number 4.
I think it's important that we understand that this is not just about Senator Schumer, but that this is about the Democratic Party. Senator Schumer, there's no one vote that ended this shutdown. We are talking about a coordinated effort of 8 senators with the knowledge of Leader Schumer voting to break with the entire Democratic Party in exchange for nothing.
She said the Democratic Party is broken. That makes me happy, happier than the happiness files that Arthur Brooks talked about. Speaker Mike Johnson brought the boom, boom, boom this morning. Cut number 2.
We believe the long national nightmare will be over tonight. It was completely and utterly foolish and pointless in the end, as we said all along. I just want to apologize to any Americans who are out there who still have flight cancellations or delays today. I want to apologize to the many American families who were made to go hungry over the last several weeks, our troops and other federal employees who are wondering where their next paycheck would come from. All of that's on the Democrats. Just never forget, they voted 15 times between the House and the Senate to close your government. And the Republicans tried every single day of the shutdown to open it, and we voted 15 times to do that. They have a lot to answer for, and I just want to say that we're very optimistic about the vote tally tonight. We think this is going to happen, and we're sorry that it took this long. So Republicans are going to deliver for the people. We're ready to get back to our legislative agenda. We have a very aggressive calendar for the remainder of this year. There'll be some long days and nights here, some long working weeks, but we will get this thing back on track. So thank you all. Stay tuned for more today.
Well said, Mr. Speaker. Now, Vice President Vance went to a MAHA event today with Secretary Kennedy of HHS. Cut number 5.
And you want to talk about, like, populism, and you want to talk about people being pissed off. Well, yeah, people are pissed off when they don't have good jobs. And people are pissed off when things disappear and move overseas. And people are pissed off when they feel like, you know, other countries are being prioritized over the United States of America. And all of that is part of the populist resentment of the past, 20 or 30 years in American politics. You know what really pisses people off? When they realize that their loved ones are dying much sooner than everybody else. And that is a big part of the story of what's going on in Appalachia and why I think so many people in Appalachia feel left behind. I mean, my story, obviously, it's been, like you said, I'm like the golden boy. Things have just worked out for me in this really incredible way. I feel so lucky and so grateful for it. But I also feel a certain sense of guilt because there are a lot of people who grew up in families like mine who haven't had an easy life and who haven't had all this economic opportunity and who haven't had, a person that they've fallen in love with and they've been able to sort of build a stable, nice family like me and Usha have been able to build. And that gives me a sense of purpose because I want those people to have the same opportunities that I've had. But it also gives me a great sense of anger because we never should have gotten to the point that we are today. And the reason that we have is because of failed leadership, and it's failed leadership over generations. And by the way, you talk about Appalachia, you were talking about people who, though they don't have much, would take the shirt off their back and give it to a complete stranger because that's what you do. If you go back to America's biggest wars, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, which are the counties that filled their draft quotas with volunteers instead of with draftees? It's very often the parts in deep Appalachia where you've got grinding poverty, but you've also got this incredible love of country. So if any place in this country deserves not to be left behind, it's Appalachia. But on the public health stuff in particular, the numbers don't look good. And it's one of the reasons why I'm such a big supporter of what you're doing, because these are people who deserve to live better, healthier lives, but they really have been left behind by this country.
If you read former Senator James Webb's book, Born Fighting, about the Scotch-Irish who settled in Appalachia. I say Appalachia. I'm from northeastern Ohio, and JD is from central Ohio. So the vice president pronounces it differently than I do, but we know the same people, and we all know what he's talking about. They would give you the shirt off the back, their own back, if you needed it. They're very generous people. He also went on to talk about Kennedy's fight with scientific orthodoxy and elites, cut number 6.
There is no way that this country is going to advance unless we're comfortable with people who are willing to challenge orthodoxy. And that's what I think got so broken, not just about the scientific bureaucracy, but probably it was worse in the scientific area than in most other places, is we've got to be comfortable challenging some of these old orthodoxies. And part of that is welcoming people who are a little unusual, because unless you do that, like, you're not going to solve America's problems with McKinsey consultants who say everything the right way all the time. No offense for the McKinsey consultants, because but many of whom are very brilliant people, but like you need the consultant mindset. You also need the person who is just thinking about an idea because it's interesting and it's fascinating and it's not being focused on enough in the right way.
Then we have Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent on Fox News today talking about why prices are going down soon on some foodstuffs, cut number 7.
But I can tell you, Brian, you're going to see substantial announcements over the next couple of days in terms of things we don't grow here in the United States. Coffee being one of them, bananas, other fruits, things like that. So that will bring the prices down very quickly. And Brian, we inherited this affordability mess. It was the worst inflation 40, 50 years, one of the worst in the nation's history. And affordability has 2 components. So there's the price level, and then there is income level. And what happened under Biden was the cumulative inflation, stated inflation, CPI, was 23%. But what happened to working Americans, their basket of goods and services, food, insurance, auto payments, was up in the 30s. So they felt a real gigantic differential there. And what we are going to do is, by bringing back high-paying manufacturing jobs, President Trump is going to do what he did in the first term, and that is for hourly workers and working Americans to have real wage increases. So, Brian, imagine 2 lines. There is the inflation line. We've got that under control. It's leveled out. That is going to start turning down. Then there's the income line, which under Biden, because so many of the jobs were government jobs, you can't get real wage growth from a government job. Real wages are going to increase, right. And I would expect in the first quarter, second quarter of next year, those 2 lines are going to cross, and the American people are going to start feeling better.
He also went on to say this about the Trump accounts for newborns after 1/1/25, cut number 8.
And then the other thing you're going to see in the middle of the year are these Trump accounts. Every child born retroactively to January 1, but for the next 3 years, is going to get a $1,000 account that's going to be invested in the U.S. stock market. So that's another $1,000 for working families.
And then he added cut number 9.
I'm also the IRS commissioner. So what I can see is that with the president's signature campaign promises, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, auto deductibility of loans if you buy an American car, Americans didn't
compare that with Kamala Harris on Angela Rye's podcast, cut number 10.
I actually write about the issue of what has been happening in Gaza in my book. And I will tell you, a lot of what this process has been for me has been about reflection. Look, we should have done more as an administration. We should have done more.
Yeah, that's the sound of supporters of Israel, Jewish and non-Jewish. I'm not Jewish, saying, thank God she did not win. We should have done more means. We should have forced Israel to deal with terrorists and allow the terrorists to regroup and reclaim the borders of Gaza, and that is not happening. Sarah C. Bedford, and you can find her at Sarah C. Bedford on X with the Washington Examiner, and she knows what's going on the Hill. Sarah, our long national nightmare is over, according to Speaker Johnson, but is it over yet?
Not quite, Hugh. There's still a couple of hours ahead of us on Capitol Hill. The House has to debate the rule, then they have to debate the funding package itself. I believe there's about an hour each for those, and then you have to have however long it takes for the House to vote, so maybe another 45 minutes or so. So you are still looking at a bit of a long night ahead of us, but very, very close to the end of history's longest government shutdown.
Now, Sarah, I'm curious, will any Democrats vote for the rule or for the continuing resolution through January tonight? I know AOC has basically made it deny or die day, but what about normies? The normies, are they going to vote to keep the government shut?
I think you could see potentially some normies. I mean, Jared Golden in Maine, for example, is one of the only ones that comes to mind that could seriously be a yes, since he's announced since the shutdown began that he's not running for re-election in his swing district. But, you know, the House Democrats have watched the backlash to Senate Democrats. Most of them are surely taking notes, seeing how much hate, at least on social media, has been heaped on the Senate Democrats who did cross the aisle to open the government. So you may have some perverse incentives there in the House.
Now, Sarah, we all say, and we all intellectually know, that social media isn't the real world. Do congressmen and senators say that but not mean it? Do they really react to it that way? Because it's not real.
It is not real. That's correct. In a general election, it's something totally worth discounting. But at this stage in the cycle, now is when you are going to start to see primary campaigns ramp up. So it's pretty bad timing for, especially for a left of center member who wants to avoid being primaried from the left, which you've seen activists start calling for as soon as Trump won, right? I mean, David Hogg got kicked out of the DNC leadership for exactly that. The base is hungry for that. So I do think that some Democratic members will look at social media as a proxy for their risk of a primary challenger.
Now, what about members of the House who are retiring? Will they feel the ability to vote their conscience among the Democrats? You mentioned Jared Golden. Aren't any other Democrats quitting, or have they not made up their minds yet?
Well, you know, again, is the juice worth the squeeze for those Democrats? In the case of the Senate, you know, that bill to reopen the government was not going to pass unless you had some Democrats cross the aisle. But right now, the government is going to open regardless of whether House Democrats cross the aisle. So in their minds, they may not see the same incentives to vote to reopen the government because it's going to reopen either way, with or without them. So why risk a Twitter pile-on?
Okay, so now my question is about Democrats generally. There's a no-win date of January 30th coming up for Democrats. If they don't pass all the appropriate bills, the same thing's going to happen. Do you expect them to pass? That 3 will be in the minibus tonight, but that leaves 9. Do you expect those 9 to pass?
I don't know how the political landscape will be any different in January than it was, you know, in October, September, whenever the first shutdown began. It was so long ago. The Democratic base didn't really have any specific goals. They just wanted the government to be shut down so that they could stop funding fascism or whatever that means. I'm not sure how air traffic controllers are fascist, but I don't think those calculations will be different for Democratic leadership. And if anything, it could be even more imperative for those like Chuck Schumer, for example, and others who might want to avoid questions about their leadership positions or a primary challenger. But I also think there's an irony in that if Democrats had avoided this whole shutdown in the first place, and they had voted to reopen the government and have this CR, which went to November 21st originally, the deadlines would have aligned much more neatly with them actually having leverage to get ACA subsidies, because those expire at the end of December. If they had threatened to shut down at the end of this month, they would have had all this time. They could have been negotiating ACA subsidies. And so if that was actually their goal, now the next funding deadline doesn't line up in January to give them any leverage over ACA subsidies.
So, Sarah Bedford, if you're looking at this as a Democrat, I think you've got a huge incentive to vote for the appropriations regular order so you avoid this again. Otherwise, you're going to be back in the trap that you hated. I think that's the rational takeaway. Do you?
Well, Democrats, they took a victory lap this week, right? Like, oh, we won, we won at least the promise that we're going to do something on ACA subsidies at some point. But common sense says that they didn't really win anything. This is very clearly a incoherent messaging and strategy from Democrats. And so I think once the dust settles, they'll realize this is a loss.
I'll be watching your account tonight, Sarah C. Bedford, on X to find out when the votes actually happen. Great reporter, great analyst, Sarah, thank you. You can tell my voice is about 50% back from laryngitis over the weekend. And I'm glad because I've got the Honest Book of Presidents in my hand, co-authored by my friend Alan Estrin, longtime producer of Dennis Prager's program. He is also one of the founders of PragerU, and he is the guy who put this together. And it's wonderful. I think it's fabulous because the Honest Book of Presidents includes 2 essays by me. So I guess I'm a little bit biased. But Alan, welcome. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Tell me about the project. So hard because my voice is about 50% here. So I need you to tell people about it.
I'm happy to do that. The Honest Book of Presidents is 2 biographies, Hugh. It is separate biographies on all the presidents from Washington through Donald Trump. And it is also a biography of the United States of America. The reason I say that is because every major issue the country has faced has run and runs through, as you know, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So you're really getting a pretty comprehensive view of American history as you read the presidents. And another point I could make on this front is that biography is a great way to learn history, and a great way to learn American history is through the biographies of American presidents. So we've got you covered on a lot of different.
I want to tell people, with what's left of my voice, the hard work that went into this. I did 2 of these biographies for Alan and his team, but his team was so intense in their research. I thought I knew what I needed to know right about Nixon and certainly Ford, but I didn't know enough. And they worked it, and they worked it, and they helped me, and I worked it, and I assume you did that for every one of these, Alan.
We did, and we brought a lot of information, a lot of expertise, a lot of brain power to bear. Now, it's not. I mean, I'd like to think some of it, as you just kindly mentioned, came from PragerU, but a lot of it came, of course, from our presenters, people like you, who really knew their subject. And what we did, what PragerU is able to do, is kind of distill that most important information into a limited form. The limited form being, of course, our 5-minute form, which we kind of made, if I can say this, famous, the 5-minute video. So we've distilled the best and most important information you need to know about American presidents into that 5-minute form. And there are so many pieces of information and so many men involved, obviously, in this project, the 45 men who became president of the United States, people that the current presidents, the famous presidents like Washington and Lincoln and Roosevelt, sure. But what about John Tyler and Zachary Taylor and Chester Alan Arthur and Benjamin Harrison? They're all in this book, and they all have fascinating, surprising stories.
I also want people to know they'll be familiar with some of the other co-writers with Team PragerU. Neil Ferguson writes on Donald Trump. Tevi Troy writes on Joe Biden. These are very, very significant authors in America today. I just looked up, though, your William Henry Harrison, Richard Lim. I didn't know about Richard Lim, but my goodness, what a background. So you obviously went on a hunt for people who could write with authority about everyone in the Honest Book of Presidents, which is, by the way, available on Amazon.com right now. Can they buy it at the PragerU store, Alan?
You know something? No. The answer, I'm going to say no. They should buy it at Amazon. That's really what helps
Amazon.
us. It's published by HarperCollins. It's not published by PragerU. So Amazon
That's
or
broadside.
yeah, any place you buy books, you can buy it.
It's a perfect Christmas present, and it's written for, I would guess you have to be at least 14 to really get it. Maybe a precocious
Yeah.
junior
Yeah.
high school student. But adults learn from it too, because nobody can know anything about William Henry Harrison. And I love that you came up with, by the way, Lord Andrew Roberts blurbed it, Victor Davis Hanson blurbed it, and our friend Charlie Kirk blurbed The Honest Book of Presidents. So it's got the heavy hitters behind it. You guys worked overtime on this. It's such a perfect Christmas present for anyone who loves American history. Is this the first book that you put out, Alan?
Are you referring to PragerU or me?
Both you and PragerU together.
Well,
Because it's a great idea. It's a great project.
Yeah, PragerU publishes a great deal of material for young people, and when I'm saying young now, I mean preschool through middle school. We have a whole
Right.
library of material at PragerU Kids, printed material. Obviously, we have a lot of video material too. This is our first adult publication, and I agree with you. I think we all hope it's going to be the beginning of a series of books on any number of topics.
And there is so much going on at PragerU, even if Dennis recovers. Would you give people a quick update on how PragerU is doing? They know about Dennis from his son and from Dennis himself, but how's PragerU been doing?
Well, it's a complicated answer. PragerU has not missed a beat. That's the good news. Uh, uh, we are producing as much material as we have in the past. In fact, we're doing more. We're very involved in this Honest Book of Presidents as part of that. We're very involved in America 250. We're just finishing a project. We finished a project for the White House, and we're just in the middle of another one. We did a project called Road to Liberty about the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, which happens to be in the White House right now and is being sent out to all American embassies and available to schools and to businesses. A fascinating history of the Declaration of Independence. And another project that we're working on is mobile museums. The White House has leased 6 semi trucks, and they've asked PragerU to outfit those trucks
How
as
wonderful.
mobile museums. And beginning in January, they're going to be driving all over the country. I mean, they may be coming to your town and parking there, and it's going to be a great experience.
Well, get ready for that, listeners, by going to Amazon right now and ordering The Honest Book of Presidents. Remember that, The Honest Book of Presidents. You'll be very glad to have this on your coffee table. It's very good to see you, Alan, even if it's only by Zoom. Thank you, my friend. Hope you enjoyed seeing Alan Estrin as much as I do. He's such a familiar figure to all of us in the Salem universe, and he does such great work at PragerU. The Honest Book of Presidents, such a good book. I want to remind you I'm in the ReliefFactor.com studio, ReliefFactor.com. It is not responsible for my voice being back 50%. Doesn't work on laryngitis, but I feel great other than that, and that's even after all those running around Little Rock, Charlotte, and up to Manchester and then back to the Beltway. And Relief Factor just keeps me going without the minor aches and pains that come with the dreaded overhead bin. And you know, especially on the smaller airplanes, the dreaded overhead bin is even more dreaded because it's smaller and you have to try and smash stuff into that. Always your shoulder and your rotator cuff, whatever it is that's bothering you, try Relief Factor. Then it won't bother you. 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, a 3-week starter pack for $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. But you got to call 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, or go online to their website, ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Also want to remind you about StopHealthCostHikes.com. That's brought to you by Conservatives for a Balanced, Americans, not conservatives, Americans for a Balanced Budget. StopHealthCostHikes.com. The government will reopen tonight after the House of Representatives votes the Senate version of the continuing resolution along with a minibus. And I've explained that throughout the day, but it won't stop the discussion over healthcare hikes. And we've got to make sure that as the emergency subsidies are narrowed, that they are narrowed in the right way, that they continue to provide relief to the working American who depends on it. Obamacare is badly broken. Some people are wholly screwed, forced into the exchanges. They didn't get to keep their doctor. They didn't keep their plan. They were thrown out onto the street. They're obliged to go into these health care plans. And while they ought not to cover people who've just crossed the border without any right to do so, they ought to have some relief for people who are making between $50,000 and $100,000 or something like that. But we don't want the windfall. That's why the shutdown happened. Democrats wanted to spend $1.5 trillion. That's ridiculous. There is a correct answer, and our friends at Americans for a Balanced Budget have it. Go and visit StopHealthCostHikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com. They're very good at legislation. I'm not so sure they're great at website names, but I like StopHealthCostHikes.com. If I say it enough, you'll get it. Finally, Consumer Cellular, 1-800-411-4454. Save money today, 1-800-411-4454. Or you can go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Remember my code, Hugh25, Hugh25. That'll get you an additional $5 off each of the first 5 monthly invoices. Get service with savings. Don't have to sacrifice service for savings. You can have both service and savings. All you have to do is go to consumercellular.com/Hugh and ask them about their data plans. If you're over 50, they will give you 2 lines, unlimited data for $60 a month. That will save everyone in this audience listening, driving home right now. But you got to remember the phone number, 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. Use my code, Hugh25, or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh and said, let's talk data. I want that deal for people who are 50 and older. I heard about on Hewitt Show. And I'll be back tomorrow, I think, with 100% of my voice, or at least 75% of it.